All right, everyone, welcome to another Stone Ridge Connect session. Today, we are going to be going over AI agents and really the next phase of work. It's a pleasure to be on here today with all of you to basically go through and hopefully educate you a little bit more on what we are seeing, obviously, with AI agent adoption and what agents are being used to tackle different types of business challenges inside of organizations that we support. The cool thing about today is that there's no marketing concept here. This is really looking at the reality then of agents and what they can do and what you should be looking at to enable your business, obviously, on the next phase of work that we are starting to see. With that, just really quickly here, my name is Scott Frappier. I am the Chief AI Architect at Stone Ridge Software. I've been in this space for quite some time with over 25 years of experience, really focusing on deep technological capabilities of our platforms. And in the last couple of years, I focused on AI and how we apply that to really the common set of business challenges that we face in order to really make it so that we can work faster, more efficiently, and eventually, hopefully, all of us can be with our families more, right? As we've got agents that can tackle all the work that we do day in and day out. So that's a pipe dream, I know, in some ways, but the net result here is that I've got quite a bit of experience and I love to really talk about what those capabilities are to be able to better educate you. Now, with that, let's go ahead and jump in because really this slide says it all for you as a business leader. The new workforce runs on agents and processes. If this could be slammed and put everywhere, for example, on your company, wherever it would be, augmented business processes by using agents is really a substantial trend that we have seen in the market with some varying success and some varying failures as this new emergent technology is being tried and used inside of many different organizations. Well, the first reason is, well, why the heck are we doing this? Why are we trying to put something through, for example, what is it, the peg analogy, right? So square peg, round hole doesn't work, right? Why are we going down that path? Well, the need is pretty clear. We'll just say it that way. As business demand rises, as we look at an economy that is not just local but also global, we start to see challenges in terms of what our people can tackle in a day in order to keep up with that. I know that firsthand being in the technology space. 53% of leaders say that productivity needs to increase. Well, that's fantastic. We all love it when our managers tell us we need to increase productivity because it's not like we're not working hard enough the way it is already, right? But what's interesting about this is the fact that the leaders are not looking at, for example, having direct people do the work. Instead, they are expecting agents to be able to help keep up with that demand for that work capacity to be able to really then get to that goal of enhanced productivity. Now, depending upon the organization, right, you really align this to the culture and capabilities. But as you can see, the thought process with many different leaders at this point, for right or for wrong, we're going to talk about the right side of this to start, is the fact that we need to be able to do more, and we feel that agents are going to be able to tackle that as we go through that particular process. So it's a really important concept that's starting to emerge more. Now, frontier firms are a concept that I introduced earlier as well, where a frontier firm is basically a firm that focuses on the usage of agents in order to basically redesign the workflows inside of their organization. Now, this is really kind of interesting when you start to shift your mentality. And for a lot of people, this is going to be tough. It was tough for me, even after being exposed to business systems for 20 years. How do I redesign a business process to be AI centric, to make it so that I use the AI agent, for example, to gather the information and then present that then to the end user for the human in the loop, but then redesign that workflow because they're not logging into Business Central or to Dynamics 365 Sales or to whatever technological solution it is. Instead, we are redesigning where agents are managing the flow and then presenting the information to the end user. So these frontier firms use basically agents to go through and do that expansion inside of their workforce. Now, that journey to being the marketing frontier firm isn't as simple as it sounds, right? But there are three common patterns that we typically see with our customers that are making that journey to the frontier firm where they are having meaningful impact in their environment with automated agents. They, for example, start with the chat interaction in Copilot to use it as an assistant. They then, for example, use agents that are out of the box, like inside of Business Central, to basically manage sales orders or sales quotes or prices that are monitored in a particular inbox, where an agent is part of a team. And then finally, there are human led agent operated scenarios where humans are setting the direction and agents are running the entire business process and workflows, and then only checking in as needed in this full enablement. We call these the three different phases of AI enablement inside of your organization. Now, there's not many that are at phase three. In fact, there may be pockets of phase three, and there's more phase one and phase two as these particular individuals have made these journeys on basically going through and then incorporating some more of those AI centric processes inside of their organization. Now, the tooling that we use to do this is fairly consistent now. And I show this intentionally not to overwhelm you with the technical nitty gritty, but basically, when we think about Copilot enablement inside of your organization or any agentic or automated agentic experience that's needed, we really focus on three technologies. We focus on Copilot, obviously. We focus on the building of agents or using pre built agents, and we focus on apps to then notify us, inform us, or interact then potentially with those agents or with those business process needs, such as approvals or human in the loop with workflow with Power Automate, that basically can then transform your business by using agents to tackle these particular challenges. So if you're going to start anywhere inside of your organization for rapid automation, for orchestration, and for those advanced capabilities, typically you're going to be starting with these three different app technologies to really drive that inside of the Microsoft platform. So the question is, like, what are agents, right? You've probably heard this before, where an agent is something that acts like a person. Well, a person or a role in an organization covers maybe many different types of information they need to retrieve, or they are a lone wolf and they are tackling things by themselves, or there are tasks that the team needs to accomplish, right? And so, from an agent perspective, we commonly see these simple versus these advanced agents that are spread between retrieval task and autonomous based categories that are then working with people, a person, a team, or an organization, and automating many of those different types of scenarios. So the gambit is fairly large. And what's interesting here is the fact that when we look at the different types of solutions that align then to those task retrieval or autonomous scenarios, as an example, an IT help desk agent might be something that's more retrieval. It's basically asking a question. Or a project tracker, for example, might be a little bit more advanced because now what it's doing is maybe it's going into Dynamics 365 project operations to get some of that phasing detail. But then we have, for example, tasks that need to be accomplished, and that might be a data refresh agent or a budget management agent that drives that. And then finally, we have more of the autonomous scenarios where maybe we've got a lead gen agent that's identifying the leads that are assigned to you and building a wonderful summary for you, or a support agent that's assisting basically with your customers and then handing out those particular requests potentially to other agents as well. So when we think about what agents can do in this next phase of work, they can start very simple for you, but then they can become very complex in terms of what they tackle for those capabilities. Now, kind of going through this a little bit more, when we think about Copilot, one of the things that we always constantly say is that Copilot is the new UI for AI, right? Well, how do I influence that UI? How do I make it better or accurate or more consistent or more autonomous or more specific towards a task that there isn't an agent around? Well, how we tackle that is we use then Copilot Studio to really be the platform to build out then these given agents inside of your organization. And this is an important concept. Once again, you've heard Copilot Studio a ton of times. Well, it is the core for really designing these business process needs inside of your organization and expanding it then to tackle what you need it to tackle in this next phase of work. I will say it as bluntly as I can. If you do not have team members that understand Copilot Studio, you will not be able to adapt to the rapid set of change that AI is introducing on the Microsoft platform, because Copilot Studio tackles the task, retrieval, and autonomous based scenarios with both custom and first party copilots that you're building inside of your organization. So once again, this is important because then also the management, the governance of this by using, for example, the Copilot control system, which includes Agent 365 and Copilot dashboards and Viva Insights, for example, are very critical then for you to be able to really get to this next phase of work. So, what are some of the cross system business scenarios that we have personally witnessed that our customers have tackled or even in the process of tackling to address some of those needs inside of their business? So, an example would be a sales support agent that monitors an exchange inbox for customer requests. It can respond to a customer to find a price. It can get a quote or generate a quote or even create an order from a quote. It uses Outlook basically to interact basically with that end user and connects then to the ERP system, and then uses human in the loop concepts to basically ask, for example, if I check mark and say, don't send a quote until you have me approve it, well, basically what it will do is it will send an email to the salesperson that's in charge of that particular customer, and then from there would allow them to approve it to then send that email. So this is a perfect example of of a system scenario or a cross-system business scenario, excuse me, that uses multiple technologies to accomplish the goal. The other scenarios that I kind of list here are very similar in concept. Cowork, for example, is a new frontier capability added basically to Microsoft Copilot that allows you to schedule activities, research information, and be extended with skills to access additional details to then drive some of that AI assistive type technology. And if I was going to say of any of these what you should implement immediately, Cowork is absolutely where I fall to really enable for this next phase of work, obviously, those capabilities. And then another agent would be, for example, a purchasing agent that scans documents that come in for those sales invoices. It automates the three-way matching, and then it sends out exception details to an end user to interact with it from Outlook as well. So these scenarios are very impactful in terms of their capabilities. So let's drill down into one. The one that I've heard so many good things about, which is Microsoft Cowork. Cowork is a perfect example of a capability inside of Copilot that spans multiple applications. It can access Teams, Outlook, SharePoint, OneDrive, and take action, and it allows you to work asynchronously. Now, that word may not mean a lot to you, but what it means is that you can start something, let it run, and go do something else, and then come back to it. So you don't have to just sit there and watch it like we've had to do for some time now. Instead, what Copilot can now do with Cowork is it can do it asynchronously and perform these activities in the background. This is what I've heard so many people say what Copilot should have been for its initial release. So there's going to be a deeper session on this today, but I wanted to at least highlight this in this session because it is the way that we do work now. So as an example, in the first session that I did, if I go ahead and just flip my screen, so we've got a little bit more that we can see, fantastic. As you can see, I am inside of Cowork. And inside of Cowork, what I have inside of here is on my schedule tab, is I have a morning email digest that I set up. And in that morning email digest, I said summarize all emails delivered from 5 p.m. the previous day to 8 a.m. today because I want to know what I missed after work was done. Well, let's see what it generated. I go to my morning email digest. So this is April 20th. Today is April 20th, as you can see. And what I'm doing here is I'm able to see these particular messages came through that are basically stating those types of urgency patterns and a digest so that I can catch up immediately. Basically, I got an email then at 8:03 a.m. that stated as an example here that there was a Power BI data reflow refresh error that occurred that went into my inbox, and it's warning me that this is an urgent action item that I need to tackle. What's really cool about this is that I can set up different types of scheduled tasks to basically accomplish those particular goals. How do I do that? I'd like to create a scheduled task that says how that gives me a quote every day that is compelling, that is sent to my inbox at 10 a.m. every day, right? So once again, very simple. And I'm showing this just off of the whim of showing a capability of what you can do. Because not only can you do this when it comes to, for example, tasks, a daily inspirational quote maybe that you would like, but you can go further than that. So you can see here basically that it's saying all the content that's around this varying theme. And what I can do is I can activate and run that. And what it will do is it will actually then set that particular task up as a scheduled task now that I can basically perform every single day. Now, it can go further than that too. So, for example, organize my inbox. I did that this morning as well. When I click on my organize my inbox, for example, where basically I put in that quote inside of there, I clicked on the action. It identified, for example, all the different types of emails that have come into my inbox, and I'm asking it basically to go ahead and then make those particular changes. And you can see that when I said, yes, please go ahead, that it is doing these particular triage operations in my email as we speak in the background as I'm doing this presentation. Other things that you can go even further around, just as an example, I had a meeting that I needed to prepare for Carlson Quality Chocolates, a great customer of ours. So if I look at, or excuse me, Clausen Quality Chocolates, if I drill down into here as an example, what we can see is that I asked for it to basically summarize a meeting. And if I go to Cowork and just expand out a little bit further, one that was actually pre-generated for me that I did before, what we can see is that it's able to generate basically the content based upon all the emails and all the details that we were able to work through as well, along with the Teams chats, you name it, to really drive that forward. So Cowork is a perfect example of how we basically go through and then use then these capabilities in M365 to go faster. If you want to research a company, you can do that. You can basically have it generate, for example, the financials of a company, whether it's a public or private company. So Cowork really allows for you to go faster in terms of what those capabilities are. All right, with that, let's keep going here in the interest of time. I'm going to go ahead and flip back over to my screen here. There we go, and let us keep at it. So what are organizations experimenting with now? So that's one example with Cowork where you can do scheduled tasks, emails, you name it, and it can generate content very rapidly for you. And even then set up scheduled tasks to get other content taken care of for you. But other organizations, they start typically like with HR agents, right? So build me an agent that looks at, like at Stone Ridge, we have our proven process that then has a playbook, and we have an agent that looks at our playbook that can answer questions regarding how many iterations of testing should we be doing for a customer when it comes to this type of functionality. So HR agents are another similar concept where maybe you've got FMLA or company policy or benefit information that you want people to be able to access. Well, you can build HR agents, and we've even demoed some of these agents in the past for FMLA as an example at prior Stone Ridge Connect events. But we're starting to see now agents that are doing more tasks instead of the retrieval. So, for example, we have general ledger agents that automate the period end close activities or do the reconciliation events of taking the tax ledger versus the general ledger and tying them out. We have data entry agents that move data from one system to another and gather data for humans to make a decision off of that then email that content and then verify, for example, those data conditions and whether or not there needs to be a human involved. A perfect example of data entry or even verification entry would be inside of a business system now. We can have an agent when you generate a production order that it will look at the inventory, and if it detects that there's a shortage, it can send an email to your purchasing team before MRP runs that states, hey, I checked out my on-hand inventory. I didn't see any purchase orders with this inventory. We need this product to basically be here by this date to ship it out. What do you want to do? And in some of those agents, we can make it so that they can say, create a purchase order for that product quantity, bypassing MRP entirely. So that way they get the product in the system immediately. And then what does MRP do? It balances it as needed, basically. So once again, these are some really amazing capabilities. Now, let's go deeper though, because once again, I want to show you the next phase. I want to show you how we use agents now with just instructions to basically go through and tackle a particular task. So one of the organizations that we're working with wanted to build a commodity contract agent that would basically take data from one system, Dynamics 365 Sales, and put that data inside of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Basically, what it's doing is it's taking financial information, verifying and validating it, and then bringing it over and then entering in fields using MCP or Model Context Protocol to basically click on the buttons and the actions to do those interactions. It has multiple agents that are tackling this. So this is an example of a multi-agent orchestration with a human in the loop concept as well, or reporting that we do to basically drive this particular process. And what's really cool about this is that there's not a single line of code that is written to address this need. It is all done with prompts. And so with that, let's take a quick look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my agent. And what I have here is my commodity contract agent. And I had a trigger that was detected. And what I'm going to do just really quickly here is I'm going to rerun this trigger. And I'm going to do it live with all of you right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically toggle my debugging mode because this is something that I worked with my agent around. And so if I go to this screen, you can see it probably a little bit better. And what we're going to see is that it said, great, Scott told me to toggle debugging. I'm going to be very verbose about what I'm doing here. And I'm going to pretend like I'm a trigger that occurs. Now, what usually happens here is that when an email or when a status change inside of Dynamics 365 Sales occurs, basically we inform the agent that the record is ready to be processed. It's like an email that you would send to the user. Hey, I entered this, it's ready to be processed. But instead, we just use a record that says that. Go ahead and process this particular one. And what we're going to see here, just as an example in the background, is that this agent is able to execute all the different steps to accomplish its goal. So we can see here it identifies the contract number, it identifies the QID that's related to it. It's grabbing these additional data elements that are inside of this particular record. And what it's doing is it's basically going through and then processing that contract. Well, how is it doing that processing of the contract? Well, what it's using here is the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP connector to basically go through and then do those activities. How does it know how to do all of this, right? It sounds like, Scott, this is a lot of code that you had to create to basically do this. And while there is a lot of thought and iteration that needs to occur off of it, it's actually pretty simple in concept. If I click on my overview while we're letting this process, we can see that this agent has a bunch of instructions that are related to it. And basically, the objective of this agent is to respond to tasks that are provided by the user and then run a particular topic, the process agent trigger, to go through and do the processing. So what happens here is that we have a trigger that comes in if we go down here when a commodity contract agent queue record is added. And what it then does is it basically goes through and jumps into a topic. And from that topic, what eventually happens is it calls another agent, a child agent that we've set up related to this. And in that child agent, we defined what we wanted it to do as part of that process. So as you can see here, we said, I want you to open the contract in D365. I want you to expand the delivery period tab. I want you to open the price details dialog. These are the instructions. It's not code that drives this for an autonomous agent that is basically going through and processing. Now, finally, what we also had to do is we wanted to make it so that the agent would then send us a success or failure email if it was unable to process successfully based upon the instructions that we have defined inside of our instruction section of that agent. Well, what does that look like? Well, in the agent, when we go, for example, into our activity and we look at an agent and what it processed, what's really interesting about this is that all of this detail right here, when we see the task was completed successfully and the records that were processed and the data updates that occurred and the price that it ended on, I didn't tell it to build this format. This is something that the agent used as it traversed basically that MCP connection. And as it's clicking on it, kept track of basically what in summary it had accomplished. And what's really cool about this is that we said in the agent at the end of your processing, please send us an email. And I'm going to show you just really quickly here how simple this is. Here's the email processing agent that we then hand off to after we go through and successfully or unsuccessfully process. And basically, I said, you are an automated agent in charge of sending either a success or failure email. I told it what success or failure was. I told it who to send it to. And then I said, make sure that the formatting is very impactful and ensure that, for example, if you know if it failed or not, do this or that, right? So I'm basically just in plain English defining that. And what I have here then is the output of what I'm talking about. So this is a processing success email that came from it using this description for instruction. I can see I've got my processing changes, my contract number, whether it succeeded or not, whether or not the final net price was correct because we have to account for rounding conditions that we're dealing with, what adjustments on what records were applied, and what was the execution steps that it basically followed to get to that particular goal, and what was the confirmation of the goals that we were trying to accomplish. I'm not joking. Like this right here in the instructions, develop this for me to basically have for my record to ensure then that this processed as expected. So this is once again the next generation of work where agents, as you can see here, are going to be the ones that are going to be doing those particular transactions, sending those emails, as you can see here, and interacting then with the system to basically then drive that particular update or efficiency gain inside of your organization. So once again, a great proof of concept to share. Obviously, it's expanding even further as we continue to work on it, but it's a fantastic capability that really highlights then how you should be looking at what work will be in the future as you really navigate down this path further. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get to the end here. So I think the key thing here is the fact that, how do you as a customer design these that I'm showing? Once again, Copilot Studio. The future of work requires somebody to know about how Copilot Studio works and interacts, obviously, with a large language model inside of Dynamics. So the things to note here is Copilot Studio is built on Microsoft and connected to everything. So when we think about what you're able to do here, you can, for example, in Copilot Studio, use Graph. You can add new agents. You can use multiple agents like I showed. You can go even more advanced and use what we call Azure AI Foundry to make your own models to be more specific to your organization and those particular rules. You can build any agent like we've kind of talked about, where you can have it very simple or very complex, where you can have it just be an agent that has a knowledge source for an HR agent, or you can build an agent like I just showed that communicates with other agents that do tasks that then perform, for example, those particular updates inside of your business systems. And then finally, here, just note that governance is a really important critical section of this, right? Where we can balance basically that governance and innovation by ensuring that the C-level security, infrastructure, capabilities inside of your organization and that leadership team has the information they need, but doesn't slow you down from being able to create what you need to create inside of your organization. So I think the key thing here from a closing perspective is that remember, agents allow for meaningful, tangible, and quantifiable increases in productivity and decreases in cost. Building an agent is easy, but building a good agent is hard. And what you need to understand is what are the capabilities of AI and then iterate off of those capabilities. Because just as an example, even in that last agent, we still have some types of issues with rounding that we are looking into, but we have iterated multiple times to tackle more and more capabilities. And I think the key thing here is that iteration is a really important concept. And once again, do not try to replace your people. Focus on helping them go faster with these agents. Agents are not really able to replace all roles inside of an organization. They're fundamentally flawed in terms of being able to do extremely complex tasks without having some type of human management. So, once again, we're augmenting performance and work by basically bringing it to the level where we can do a lot of the automation with an agent, but we can present that information in a much more streamlined fashion then to your end user to really be successful then inside of that process. All right, with that, I think we're a couple minutes over. I really appreciate your time. I hope that this was impactful so that you understand really what that next phase of work is going to be. And I hope, for example, you're able to go through and get a little bit more detail on MCP and some of those other technologies that our team is going to be conveying around AI so that you are really ready for this next phase of work. With that being said, thank you again for joining this Stone Ridge Connect session and have a great rest of your day.